Welcome back to part 14 of the Frogger mini-series, and in this video we'll be creating the turtles that will be used during the river portion of the map. Let's not waste any time and just jump right into it. Okay, last we left off we created the logs for the river portion. Real quick, just keep our stuff organized. Let's click on the first log in the details outliner, and then hold shift and click on the last log. And then click on this little folder icon in the top right corner, and we'll add everything into a logs folder. That way we have logs, roads, and vehicles. Keep everything neat and tidy. Okay, so first thing we need to do is import our static mesh. So we'll come to our art folder, right click, create a new folder, and we'll just call this one the turtle. And I'll make this static mesh available in the Gumroad download as well. So we have a texture set, so we'll highlight all the textures, just drag them in. Import should kick off automatically. Then we have two static meshes. Don't ask me why, I don't know how to do this in Unreal, but this one, you should just be able to import it and it just does the static mesh as well. But for some reason, if your static mesh has an animation on it, it wants to import it as a skeletal mesh only. So we'll hit import. That's fine. And then last but not least, we have the turtle mesh only with no animations. That's just so we can get the preview mesh going. And we'll hit import on that. That way we can basically use it similar to how we set the logs. So I'll make all that available on the Gumroad, of course. So now with that we have everything set up there, we need to create the material. So we can highlight our albedo or color, and then right click, create a material. We'll call it m_turtle. And then we can press enter or double click to open that up. And just like all the other textures we've been setting up, I do all my texturing inside Marmoset, so it's done much the same way. We'll drag in the other two textures. And then our normal, RGB goes into normal. And then the mix map, we'll take the red into the ambient occlusion, the green into the roughness, and the blue into the metalness or metallic. Then we can save that. Now this one's a little bit different than the typical static meshes. Normally we would just open the static mesh and assign it. We can do that on the preview mesh, but that doesn't matter because we changed the material in the base class anyways. So we'll have to set this in the blueprints. So let's head to the blueprints. And we're going to right click on our BP moving objects parent, and we're going to create a child blueprint class, which is what we've done for all the vehicles as well as the log. So pretty much everything that's going to be moving, we'll just make it off this one blueprint class. Calling this BP_turtle. Double click to open that up. And we just want to add in our static mesh. So we'll go back to the turtle folder. So this one you want to highlight the skeletal mesh, and then you'll hit the add option and they'll make a reference to the skeletal mesh turtle 1, which is fine. Now looks very green at the moment. You'll notice there are 4 materials. The first 3 materials are just for the eye, so you can ignore those, but the third or the 4th material, so it starts at 0, it's number 3, that's the one we want to make as the m_turtle. That way it looks more decent. Alright, now that's pretty good. We're going to do something a little different. We might actually replicate this to the logs, but in the previous one we just used the static mesh as the collider. So if we search for collision, you'll notice this one has no collision, so we normally set that to block all dynamic for the logs, and that's how we did that. But this shape is not very square, it's very rounded, so there could be instances where the player jumps on top and maybe the launching point may not be straight, or he may get flipped or rotated off slightly by the moving arms and such. So I think it's better if we leave this to no collision, and let's actually just use the box collider, which we normally use for the vehicles as an overlap event, but we don't really need it for the logs or the turtles, so we can use it as a blocking event or a step. So we need to make it a little bit bigger. We can do 108 by 184 by 45, I found works pretty good. And then what we want to do is, with the box collider selected, we'll search the details panel for collision, and instead of overlap, which is what we did with all the vehicles, we're going to set that to be block all dynamic. That way the player can actually step up on the turtle. So let's actually come to front view and maybe move this over here. And I think I want to move this up a little bit. So I think right there is pretty good. And we'll go back to perspective, and that looks pretty okay. So we can compile and save, and let's actually place this out in the world and see what it looks like. So we'll go back to our blueprints, drag the turtle out, and set it at 0. We gotta figure out how to position this thing, and maybe right about there. That way the turtle's eyes are just kind of slightly above. So I think that looks all right. And we want to be able to jump on it, so we can take 7450 and copy that, and we can place this at the same spot because we know that works with our launch vector that we're using. So if we play this and go to the turtle, the log should go through it. And then we'll try jumping on the turtle. And that's working pretty good. The log's going to carry me off here. But basically we want the player to be able to move around and nice and square, because that way if they're over here and they jump, it's a straight jump, because we are using a launch as in the code. So if we use the actual static mesh, that could be problematic because the player could be slightly angled on the head or on the fins, and it'll basically change the launch vector, which means the player may kind of shoot a little bit off to the side or down, or basically the jumps are going to be a lot harder. But he looks a little plain, so let's go ahead and animate him real quick. We can come back to the turtle folder. We'll right click, create new animation blueprint. Now we have to select the skeletal rig. In this case, it's turtle _ skeleton. We'll hit create. Use call it ABP _ turtle. We can double click to open that up. The animation is going to be very simple. We can just search for a state machine. We'll call this just swim. It's only going to have one animation. Double click, and then we can add a state. Call it swim. Our entry point will go into this singular animation. And we have 3 animations, but we're just going to use the swim one to make things simple. And then there is a loop animation option. I'm going to check that. Hit compile. I now have a swimming green turtle, which looks great. But this is just an animation blueprint. It does not correspond to our actual blueprint, which is why the turtle is not doing anything. But because we added a skeletal mesh, it gives us the option, when we select it, to add an animation class. We can use the ABP turtle that we just created, and we're off to the races. You don't have to create an animation blueprint either. You could statically add the animation or play the animation in the event graph. That works perfectly well as well. But I think it's good to use animation blueprints. That's basically what they're designed for. Keep your animations separate from your actual blueprint class, and then you basically just assign them to the skeletal rig that's being used. I think it's a little bit cleaner, and it's likely more efficient too, I would assume, based on the way Unreal has everything set up. But this looks good, so we can now compile, and now when we play, I should have moved the turtle down a little bit further, but we can see he's in the water, he's animating. That's great. The animations shouldn't impact this at all because we're not using his mesh as a collider. We're using that box collider, which looks great. So everything's squared up and that'll work well. So let's come out of there and let's figure out how to place our objects now. So we only want really 2 lanes, and it depends on your setup. Like originally I had 6, but I think for simplicity we'll just do 4 to make this a little bit shorter. So I think we'll do a log lane, and then we'll do a turtle, and then a log lane, and then a turtle, and then the finish line will be over here, which will be our win condition. So we can basically just copy this X position right here, And then we can paste it over here, and that'll move it in the right lane. And then we don't need these logs anymore, so we can delete those. And then the turtle is actually going to be going the opposite direction. That way the player can basically time their jumps appropriately. So let's move the turtle into position, maybe right about here. All right, and then you'll notice because we're using the parent class for all the vehicles, we have our behavior type. We're going to set that to be loop reset. And then we have our duration. I think the turtle should move pretty slow, so I think we'll do 40 seconds, which is the longest that we've done so far. And then for the control points, we're just going to add 2 control points. And then we move along the Y. And we'll move this up here. You'll notice you don't have the preview mesh, so if we go into the turtle, we'll select the BP turtle root component. We have the preview mesh. That was why we imported that second turtle mesh. So we have the capability to compile that, and now we have an actual turtle that we can position and place. Although I am regretting using the blue color that we chose now. It's a little bit harder to see, but that's all right. We'll make it work. Okay, so move this here. Now this should go to the furthest point because we're going to spawn turtles behind the one, which means it'll carry back and it'll keep that same position. So that looks good. So we can select this. And now if we wanted to, I think it's easier if we butt up the turtles kind of like so. So the player has a nice easy platform to land on. And then we can shift select these, hold Alt, and then we can drag one back like that. And then we can drag another back like so. Now if we play this, we'll hold apostrophe tab so we can come into debug mode. And we can see the turtles are swimming through nicely. And then they're lining up with the logs here. And that looks like it's working okay. And we may want to increase the number of logs over there, especially since they kind of go underwater, which we can do. Because this one ends right there, and because they're going underwater, it makes them easier to use. So we can actually probably do something like this, and then just push them back like that. And then we can actually see what this looks like. Maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. It's kind of why you play test. And we could do the same thing with the turtles, because I think it would be fun to have the turtles go underwater randomly as well. We were normally just having the logs go under once they hit a certain threshold. But because we got some ones further back, those will actually go down at the same time, like so, and then kind of disappear. So maybe that doesn't work out too well. But another way to accomplish that, so let's maybe undo. Let's get rid of that one and that one. We'll leave the one in the back. But another way to accomplish that is before we did it with the actual, we just added another control point and just put it underwater. We can actually do it on the blueprint itself, kind of make it a little bit different behavior. So if we come to the turtle, we'll go to the event graph. Off the begin play, we can just come into a simple timeline, and we can call this maybe dive. And then we can use our turtle object and do a set relative location. We'll split it. And we not only want to move the turtle, but we also want to move the box collider as well, because that's what the player stands on. So we'll take the update pin and update the location. And then we just, since this is relative location, this is just an offset. So if you do set world location, you'd have to get, you know, the turtle's position, get world location, and then, oops, that's the wrong one. Get location, and then you'd have to split this, and then you'd have to pass the X, the Y, and then, you know, get the Z and subtract it. So it's basically a world position. If you do relative, you only have to add the offset, which makes it a little bit easier. So that's why we'll do this. Then we can double click on the timeline. And then I'm going to add maybe a 20-second timeline. And then we'll add a singular float track. We'll call this our depth. And then we'll add our first keyframe at 0, 0. Our last keyframe at 20, 0. And then we need to figure out where we want the turtle to dive in this timeline. So we can maybe add a keyframe at we'll do the 14-second mark. And we'll go down 300 units, like so. But what we actually want to do is, before that, we will do a keyframe at 13, 0. So that way it's kind of a sudden drop. And then after that, we want to stay underwater for a bit. So how long you want to stay underwater, that's kind of up to you. I'd say maybe we can do 3 seconds. So maybe 17, negative 300. And then we can surface back in 1 second. So time 18, back to 0. So now we kind of have this timeline. So we'll compile, save that. We do want this to loop. So once it starts, it'll basically keep playing because it's the same object, it's just resetting. So that should work for our needs. So then we can just pass the depth into the new Z location like so. And then you're updating the box's position, which is this thing here. And what we can do is go make that visible in game so we can see what it's doing. And then we're also updating the turtle. So we're basically, the root component staying in the same spot, just moving left to right, but we're just moving the static mesh for the turtle and the box collider. So if we save that, play, I think I hooked that up to the event begin play. So now after 14 or so seconds, those things should dive. There they go. And they're back up. And that's the sort of behavior you get. And then when they, it's a 40-second duration, so it should happen twice in the one go. And then a loop reset and just kind of go from there. Yeah. All right, that looks all right so far. So then what we can do is, the last thing we need is this guy. So we need 10 to 40, which I can just copy, I think. Yeah, I'll just copy that. And what I'm going to do here, so I'll shift select these. Actually, what I'll do is I will just drag 1. I will paste this on the X so it puts it in the position of the logs. Actually, I could have just probably moved it over visibly. That would have been fine too. And then we will do... Actually, before I do that, I'm going to delete that. I want to maybe make this a little bit faster. So maybe I'll do 35 seconds. We can see what that looks like. And then let's have a 3 set of turtles, like so. And then we will shift select all 3 there, and I'll just do one of these. All right, so now if we play this, you can see the turtles swimming across. Here comes the logs. Probably need to spawn more logs over there. So especially in the middle. They really only use 2. And there they go. And the player basically is going to have to jump across going back and forth. So we clearly don't have enough logs to go through. But let's actually see what this looks like in practice. So come over here, hop over this. And then we wait for our turtles. Dang it. So that would be a death there. But we got the basic mechanics, which is great. So now we can basically play with the level setup at our leisure. Jump on this one. Now, does the turtle stay up long enough to where we can hit the other log? Doesn't look like it. Maybe. Alright, so that worked. And I can basically ride this down until I catch a new set of turtles. I probably should have waited. Nope, that's good. And there's your victory screen. So we'll basically kind of set that up a little bit later, but we also forgot to delete these logs over here. So we can get rid of these because we no longer need them. And we definitely need another one of these, maybe right here. Yeah, I think that'll work fine. So that wasn't too bad for what we had. So lots of different ways we can approach this, but here's just one example, and it's pretty versatile, pretty flexible, you know, for a scalable solution anyways. But all right, good people, I think we will cut the video here, kind of keep it somewhat short. Looks like this one a little bit longer, but in the next one, we'll work on the death and game over states for this prototype. But as always, thanks for watching, consider subscribing, and we'll see you on the next one.